Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to the channel. So check it out, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee are now bootable and in a semi-playable fashion on Yuzu, this Nintendo Switch emulator. For anybody who's not aware, Yuzu is made by pretty much the same development team as Citra, the 3DS emulator. This basically means that the last 3 Pokemon games have booted day one on the emulators that this development team have made. It really is absolutely crazy that this game is performing and looking in any way like it does right now. You are going to see that there's going to be some rendering bugs. For example, you'll see right now that the fonts are not being correctly rendered. This is a very similar circumstance to what we see in Super Mario Odyssey in any of the menu tiles or if you go to a language selection. Now, performance-wise, you can see we're running at 42 frames per second, and to be honest, it's kind of sped up due to the fact that Pokemon Let's Go does, at least at this point in time, seem to be a 30 frames per second title. You can see the speed up in my running and walking around the living room of my own house. So let's just exit out into the open world, and we're going to see what our performance is like there. So on my 8700 with a 980 Ti and 16GB of DDR4 RAM, you're seeing I'm getting anywhere between around 22 and 32 frames per second, and this is where you're going to see some of the weird performance issues. So as I previously said, while I do believe that this game is a 30 frames per second title, even though in this area I am getting 32 frames per second, it does seem to be experiencing slowdown, which leads me to believe that, well, maybe this game is using some kind of a dynamic frame rate, and maybe it could just be a bug in Yuzu itself. We'll have to wait and see. This game has literally only been booting at time of making this video for about 6 or 7 hours. Even in that 6 or 7 hour period, they have already fixed several soft locks that were occurring within the game. They fixed one issue where it would just crash to a black screen, and they have also fixed and completely implemented the audio in the game. When it first became bootable, it basically had no audio due to the fact that the only way you could get it to boot was to set your audio renderer to null, which basically meant that you had absolutely no audio in the game. Well, yes, now we do have audio. You are going to hear that it is slightly slowed down due to the fact that we are not running at the maximum target frame rate for this game. Rendering wise, it is, I would almost say, perfect, at least in these open world situations. You're going to see that there are some slight glitches in the battle scenes, not with rendering itself, but with the actual effects from some of the attacks, like for example Pikachu's Thunderbolt. So out in this opening area, you are going to see that we're getting, as I said, anywhere between 30 and 40 frames per second. Let's just get ourselves introduced to our very first Pokemon and actually get into our very first catching situation and see exactly how that is working on the emulator at this point in time. So here we are in the wild Pokemon battle, and let's just see how it works once we get through this dialogue. So it's press A is basically just letting us skip. We don't really have any other options, they are grayed out, so all we can really do is select to throw a Pokeball. Now, motion telemetry isn't implemented on Yuzu emulator just yet, but you can use your left thumbstick to move your camera around, and then you can simply click the A button on your controller to throw a Pokeball. This is definitely some good news, as with other previous titles on other emulators, like for example CMU, some sections were very hard to do without motion. Thankfully, they have made motion controls optional in this game. At least at first glance, it seems like there are no functions that are going to forcibly require you to use motion controls, so that is a good thing at least. I really am not a fan of forced motion controls a la Skyward Sword. So to talk about playability, I would say that at this kind of performance rate, it is definitely very playable. Now, do bear in mind that I am using a very top tier CPU. I am using an 8700K that is currently clocked at 4.9 GHz. And please do remember that if you are using a CPU that is worse than this and has a lower core clock, you can expect worse performance than this. Do also remember that, as I've previously said, this game has only been bootable and in a semi-playable fashion for probably 7 hours, so please do give the developers some time to get to work on it. So next up, I guess we have to actually pick our Pokemon, so let's just pick our central one for Pikachu, and in this next area you're going to see another weird rendering bug. In these semi-cutscene areas, you're going to see that there is this weird kind of Gaussian blur effect over the screen that hopefully will be fixed sooner rather than later. It's not really too bad, to be honest, as you can definitely make out exactly what is happening, and you can see that the render quality behind the blur is actually quite good. Getting back into gameplay and kind of getting up close to the character models, you can see just how well, even in this undocked mode, the game is looking at this point in time on Yuzu. So there is another small bug in this next screen. If you select yes to rename your Pokemon, it is going to crash the emulator, or it's going to crash on an unimplemented service. So all you have to do is select no and you will be able to continue absolutely no problem. So now that we actually have our first Pokemon, we can get started on our travels and get started with testing this game for compatibility. Once back out in the open world, you can see that as before our performance was very good, so let's just venture out into the open world and try to catch our very first Pokemon. And straight away, there we go, we have a Pidgey, so let's just try get into a random encounter and catch this Pokemon. As before, you can see that this screen basically functions and works perfectly. You can move around with your left thumbstick, throw Pokeballs by pressing the A button, and it should catch this Pokemon very easily as it's a very low level. And there you go, we have successfully caught it and it works 100%, however it's not locked at full speed even in these battles. You'll also see that after the battles, the Pokedex fully works and fully updates, and the 3D models inside of the Pokedex also work, while the fonts currently do not. So we already have a Pidgey, so next let's try catch a Rattata. Now, I can see why some people see this game as being pretty casual, and to be honest, if I had it my way, I would have definitely had it so the game had optional wild Pokemon battles, as we have seen in all previous Pokemon main titles. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. You never know, Nintendo might actually add this feature to have wild Pokemon battles in some form of DLC or update in the future. As I said, I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I for one would definitely appreciate something like this in this game. Okay, so let's quickly get this Oddish captured and we can move on and see what our performance and render quality is like in the next town. So let's just throw a Pokeball once again, and since this one is a very low level, it should capture very, very easily. Yep, we caught it really, really easily, so let's just proceed into our Pokedex and we should see that... Oh, there we go, our Pikachu leveled up. That's kind of what I'm talking about before. It just doesn't kind of make sense that your Pokemon level up for not really having done anything, I guess you could say. But yeah, we're just gonna have to wait and see. This game is very, very fresh, and I guess we're just going to have to wait and see just how this kind of gameplay feels after maybe a week or so of release. It will give us plenty of time to actually get to grips with how we actually feel about it. So let's just get through the rest of this wild grass and we should be able to get into the next town without any issues. You'll see that, as before, the fonts don't render, and if we run to the top of the town, we're going to see some very, very familiar characters. So for now, we're not going to actually interact with them, as I just want to get to the Pokemon Center and see what it looks like inside, since Pokemon Centers are just such an iconic symbol in Pokemon games. So when we come inside, you'll see Nurse Joy and Clefairy, and you can see that once again we're running at 33 frames per second, but it doesn't seem to be slowed down inside Pokemon Centers or inside of buildings. It's just very, very weird. It seems as if there's some kind of weird frame difference between internal and external. Maybe it's Yuzu just being weird, but I guess we're just going to have to wait and see and get even more development progress on this game. So you can see inside of the map, it does work quite well. You can see that places we haven't visited don't show up as they should, and yeah, it's just pretty cool. So in here seems to be rendered very, very well, and as I showed, it runs pretty well and seems to be running at 1x speed. So let's just come out into this main area, and when we talk to people, we're going to see the same bugs, and we can also see that Pikachu has gone to take a look at some of the flowers. So let's just leave Pikachu there for now, and we're going to go talk to the Poke Shop. Is it pharmacist? I can't exactly remember what his name is, but yeah, let's just go talk to him and we should get prompted to head back to our hometown. So let's just... Okay, so have I frozen? No, I haven't frozen. Okay, so let's just continue through here, and after this I should get prompted, do I want to return? And I'll just click yes, and this should bring me back to the Pokemon lab. So we're back in the Pokemon lab, so let's run up to Professor Oak, and we're going to talk to him, and it's going to trigger another kind of cutscene. It's not really a full cutscene, but yeah, we're going to see Pikachu jump up onto my shoulder. Look how well rendered it is. It's crazy to see that that this game was just released today and it's already looking this well. Well, technically it was released yesterday, but it just looks so damn well. It looks so good. And bear in mind that this is running in a lower resolution mode, I believe. I'm pretty sure that Pokemon Let's Go looks better in its docked mode than it does in undocked, even though I believe it does run at the exact same frame rate in both modes. Now, some players on the Switch, I haven't seen it myself to be honest, have reported stuttering in the battles. As I said, I haven't seen it myself, but I guess only time will tell. I'm going to have to progress a little bit further into the game, as to be honest, I generally only buy these games and test them on my Switch for comparison to the emulator, as emulation is my main focus. So once we try to exit the Pokemon lab, we're going to get in our very first Pokemon battle with Gary. This will allow us to check out the render quality in battles, how the UI is being rendered, and how the game is performing. So let's just skip through this initial bit of dialogue, and you can see that performance wise we're running at anywhere between around 38 and 55 frames per second, and when we go to use Pikachu's Thundershock move, you're also going to see that its lightning effect is not currently being rendered either. This doesn't mean that all effects are not being correctly rendered. You can see from that tackle attack that some of its effects were at least being rendered. You will however see that there are some bugs with certain moves, like when we do this quick attack, Pikachu's movement effect is not being correctly rendered in the game at this point in time. So speaking of the game's progress and playability at this point in time, when we do another Thundershock attack, you're going to see that I will defeat Gary's Eevee. He's going to recall it, and at least at this point in time in Yuzu emulator, the emulator is going to freeze or crash at this exact point. Now, if you transfer a save over from your Nintendo Switch that is past this point, you will be able to continue, but since I like to keep my videos on the topic of how games are running right now, this is how the game is running. It crashes at this point. You're going to need a game save to get in game. If you need one, I can provide one in my Discord server. You can find a link for that down in the description. You will also find one in the compatibility guide for Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Pokemon Let's Go Eevee on the Yuzu official compatibility guide. And if you need to find a legitimate way to get your games, do not be afraid to ask either on my Discord or over in the official Yuzu one. Links to everything I just mentioned will be found down in the description of this video. Down there you will also find a link to the official Yuzu Patreon. If you want to help with the development of this emulator in any way, you should definitely consider heading over there and pledging your support. Keep an eye on the channel in the coming days and weeks for any compatibility and playability updates in not only this game but many other games on this Switch emulator. As always, if you have any games you want me to test in my compatibility guides, let me know down in the comments below. Once again guys, cheers for checking out this video. Remember to like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, and as always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see all future videos from me.